Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the first annual WITA Trade Conference. My name is Andrew Gelfuso. I'm a Vice President at Trade Center Management Associates and Director of the World Trade Center, Washington, D.C. We've been proudly serving as the exclusive manager of this facility for the past 20 years through a unique public-private partnership with the U.S. General Services Administration. This building's home to both government and private sector tenants, and as part of our congressional trade mandate, we host over 300 cultural and trade events each year, many of which are open to the public. Coming up, we have events such as the Embassy Chef Challenge with Events DC, the Pink Tie Party Lunch with the Japanese Embassy to celebrate the Cherry Blossom Festival. And this Thursday, we're hosting the Deputy Mayor of DC and his team as they take local businesses through growth workshops and explain various programs available through the DC government as far as grants. Other programs that we're involved in, we run reverse trade missions for the states and for the federal government. We work through our network of trade center partners around the globe to open doors for our clients and make unique connections. But for more information about our organization and this building, I encourage you to check out our booth in the foyer. Nearly since its inception, the congressional mandate of this building has dovetailed incredibly well with the mission of WITA. And together we've enjoyed a tremendous partnership that has gone on now about 20 years. Together we've offered a neutral forum for the open and robust discussion of international trade policy, politics, and related issues. The lineup of speakers that you're going to hear from today are just simply of the highest caliber. It's been wonderful to be on this journey with Ken as the program was developed, and it's fun to see how far it's come in such a short period of time. Now I'd like to introduce and welcome to the stage the Executive Director of the Washington International Trade Association, Mr. Ken Levinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the Reagan Building for sponsoring this event and welcoming us and supporting all our activities throughout the year. Welcome everyone to the first ever Washington International Trade Conference. We're grateful to all of our speakers who are joining us here today, especially thankful to Congressman Kevin Brady for joining us. He has to leave for the first Ways and Means hearing of the year, which is just coming up in a few minutes. So we're going to move the timelines up a little bit. You have everything in your program. I'll do a little bit more of an introduction after their discussion, but I'd now like to welcome to the stage one of WITA's biggest supporters, Laura Lane of UPS, to introduce Mr. Brady and Ambassador Schwab. Laura, thank you. Your early support for the conference has helped get this off the ground. Thank you.
You know, Ken, I can't believe it's been 22 years since we were in Geneva together and, you know, in the middle of a snowstorm, brokering the deal on basic telecommunications, and it's exciting that we're partnering again because we were brought together on the basis of trade, and now we're here together to talk about all the important issues that we need to grapple as a community to really advance the interests of all the companies and stakeholders in the community. On behalf of UPS, I couldn't be more pleased to sponsor today's event and support WITA's trade education mission because that's so important in terms of getting everybody to understand how important trade is to the growth of U.S. companies, to job opportunities for Americans, and for opportunities for export among all the customers that I know ship with UPS or FedEx or any of the companies that take us around the world. Today's conference will look at some of the really important issues that are facing our country and the world. The passage of the USMCA, digital trade issues, the negotiations with China, and trade politics, which I want to argue should not be red or blue. At UPS, they're brown. At FedEx, they're purple. We need to bring everyone together to recognize that trade is something that is important for everyone that's a part of the United States. And we really value the bipartisan efforts that Congressman Brady has brought to those discussions, and Ambassador Schwab has brought into the negotiations. So let me introduce them both. Ambassador Susan Schwab and Congressman Kevin Brady, I think, are two of the most important trade leaders in our nation. Individually and together, they have been responsible for some of America's most important trade initiatives. Ambassador Schwab concluded trade agreements with Peru, Colombia, South Korea, as well as launching and settling trade disputes and engaging in various negotiations under the auspices of the WTO. Congressman Brady's state, the great state of Texas, which I married into, is the #1 exporting state in the nation and one of the fastest growing. He's been an outspoken supporter of the U.S., Mexico, and Canada agreement, and in the coming year, he will be at the center of some of the most important trade issues facing our country. Passage of USMCA, negotiations with China, and so many other more significant engagements that we're going to have with Japan, the UK, and the EU. So I'm not going to dive into their bios because you have them in their program, but thank you both for joining us, and I know all of us are looking forward to today's discussion. Congressman Brady and Ambassador Schwab.
Ken, thank you. Laura, thank you very much. Thanks to our sponsors, and welcome everyone. Our job this morning is to preempt all of the wonderful panels that you all have are looking forward to, and I am just honored to have Congressman Brady here, one of my real heroes on Capitol Hill.
Oh, it's the feelings mutual. As you know, as Laura was talking about some of your initiatives, which were remarkable, they were also tough trade agreements politically and negotiating, and you just carried it through beautifully, and they're working well for the U.S. and for them.
And it's gotten so much easier since I left office. Yeah, okay, so why don't we start with, speaking of easy, let's start with some easy ones. And let me ask, and of course, nobody here is going to say anything outside this room.
Just between you and me.
Yeah, just between you and me.
Okay.
What do you think the prospects are for USMCA?
Yeah. So the short answer, it should be approved because look, it has some really solid wins for us here, whether it's digital trade services, phytosanitary, customs, locking in the reforms on telecom. Some of these are really gold standard that we can use for future trade agreements. Others either retain, current strong provisions or slightly improve them. Are there some areas where members have raised concerns? Yes. As you know, every trade agreement, is a mixed issue, and so I know Democrats are voicing the need for strong enforcement on the labor provisions. We don't know yet if they'll go farther than May 10th on some of the environmental issues. For Republicans, it's more of the architecture. The investor state protections are not as broad and as strong as they need to be in our members' views. We still are trying to figure out how the sunset mechanism works for or against certainty for trade long term. And there's issues like de minimis and procurement. But as you know, those are natural, in these types of agreements. And yesterday, Vern Buchanan, who will lead the Republicans on the Trade Subcommittee, and I met with Ambassador Lighthizer to really lay out, we are beginning the process for educating and briefing members on the agreement, getting their feedback from them, starting to count the noses. You know what I mean? As you know, we do in each of these agreements. I think two of the key questions are, one, what will the Democrat demands be on the enforcement? What does that look like? And I think Ambassador Lighthizer is eager to see what that to-do list is, to figure out how can he can accommodate it if at all. And he's serious about and sincere about doing that. But I think one of the key things in my discussion with members, Republicans and Democrats, are they're not really willing to consider this agreement until the steel and aluminum tariffs are ensured to be lifted off, including quotas. Frankly, the quotas can be just as disruptive as tariffs can be, especially for those larger projects that an energy country like America is. And I think the truth of the matter is the agreement's strong enough to stand without them. These are our fair trading partners, trading fairly in those metals. So I think that's going to be one of those threshold issues. Once we get back that, I think we'll probably see the true level of support. And I think Ambassador Lighthizer, to his credit, has written much of this agreement, listening very carefully to the Democrats' concerns, and has made a very strong effort. Our hope is that translates into Democrat support for the agreement. We want trade to be bipartisan. It has to be. As you know, from the hard-fought victories in Colombia, Peru, Korea, it is always best if we're able to work this out together.
Including the May 10 agreement.
Yes, really crucial.
We all have scars from that one.
We do. We do.
So it sounds like you had a really interesting conversation with Ambassador Lighthizer. Do you have a sense, if you had to guess, I won't hold you to this one, a sense of timing?
Yeah, not at this time. I think we all want sooner rather than later. I think the key will be to identify, and for Democrats have responsibility really to come forward with what are the improvements they want to see so he can begin the work of trying to fulfill them. I think that's pretty key to it. This one agreement is a little more complicated in process only because you're amending an existing agreement. You know what I mean? That text, and the process is a little more complicated that way, but I think we're all hopeful we can begin the work.
So let me ask an awkward question, which is, because this is one that sort of ebbs and flows, but at the time, let me think of a politically appropriate way of doing this.
This must be a doozy of a question.
It's a doozy of a question. You, as chairman, had a great deal of autonomy in operating Ways and Means on issues that are under the auspices of the Ways and Means Committee. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not the case. You've got a pretty good group of Democrats that you're dealing with.
We do.
On the Ways and Means Committee. To what extent do you think that the committee is going to be able to do its work as distinct from being dictated to from others in the party?
Yeah, so Richie Neal
the leadership.
from Massachusetts, I think can be an excellent chairman. I have a great deal of respect for him. We work together very well. He understands the issues and has an institutional knowledge, of the House. And so while I would prefer there was another chairman of the Republican Party still, I think we're going to be able to work together on a lot of issues. The last time, and you're sort of alluding to it, the last time this occurred, much of the Ways and Means was directed out of Speaker Pelosi's office. It just was.
That's kind of what I was saying.
And you could almost have turned off the lights and locked the committee room. We're hopeful that's not the case this time. I think, we've got a really great committee on both sides of the aisle. A lot of new members, obviously, to deal with. But Richie Neal, as chairman, he's got a strong sense of the issues, measured approach, and we're hopeful that she can give him the running room to really deliver on some of these issues.
She's got a good committee. She's got a good committee to rely on.
Yeah.
She's got a good group there.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, I'm delighted to hear it.
Yep.
So that was easy.
It took longer to frame the question.
No. This is good. This is very helpful. So if that is doable, potentially, we've got big negotiations starting this week here in Washington with the Chinese. We have a very interesting panel coming up this morning, which is titled, I think, very cleverly, "What is the definition of winning?"
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the current U.S.-China conflict?
So the president is right to challenge China on its trade practices, which the whole world knows has existed. And for those of us who fought hard to move them into the WTO, there is just, I think, a wide disappointment and frustration that their promises and commitments haven't been held. And everyone knows that creates real damage to U.S. workers and farmers and business people. It's not fair. So the president's right to challenge China there. I think these discussions are important, not because we should anticipate or expect, an overnight miracle. This didn't happen overnight. It won't.
Right.
It will take some time to do it. I think there are some early wins in the procurement side. I think there can be, in the second area, structural reforms to give our businesses fair treatment, and the ability to operate own, invest on an equal playing field without cheating, in China. I think that's a second area we could see some gains in, not just reiterating what China's already done. Looking backward won't work, but actual measurable changes in behavior going forward. I think we could see some progress there. It's the third area. Those structural reforms really tied to the Made in China 2025, really these national champions, undergirded by subsidies and preferences and really an unfair trading advantage throughout the world. I think that is the area that will be more long-term, but it is worth having that long-term discussion. I think the key, because I think tariffs can cause real damage for both the equation and the world. That way, I think, we ought to feel comfortable trading tariffs for measurable reforms. You know what I mean? And tying those together, I think that's important. Secondly, we ought to be excluding fairly traded goods, in our relationship with China. That's why I think this product exclusion is so important. It's no substitute for not having tariffs, but if you're going to use tariffs to leverage these discussions, and you want to cause as less pain, unnecessary pain, is needed. I think that's important. Final point. I think victory for me. I've been pushing for a true bilateral investment treaty with China for a long time. We discussed it way back when. I still think
we were trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important step forward to a fair trading relationship. I also think at the end of the day, I've urged Ways and Means Republicans have urged the president to become personally engaged in the negotiations. He has developed a relationship with President Xi. I think at the end of the day, he will be the one that can create a new trading relationship that's fair and more long-lasting, between the U.S. and China.
Right.
And so we're hopeful when the time is right that he's able to do that.
No, that makes a huge amount of sense. And the risk here, obviously, of self-inflicted wounds is very high on both sides, by the way.
It is, which is why can I stick around for your panel on what victory looks like in China? So I want to hear the other thoughts there.
No, it's a great title, but I think your analysis is right on target. I mean, the Chinese are not helping themselves either, so there is some potential there.
I think the key is to avoid a protracted trade war that continues to do damage on both sides in the rest of the world, by the way.
Right.
It spills over
Right.
to there in a big way. So I think these talks are important.
Right,
Yeah.
precisely. So moving to another part of the world, since we're on this jaunt around the world in the short time that we have here, looking at Europe.
Yeah.
Now, the EU. Let's start with the EU, and then we'll go to the UK, because that's one that, belies anything that I've been able to figure out. So let's talk about the EU. What do you think the prospects are, and what do you think? What's your level of interest in a U.S.-EU deal?
Level of interest is very high. I've been in support, a lot of us have, of TTIP. And the one Europe's a huge trading partner with us, very deep ties, but we've also had some of our deepest disputes with Europe, and we've tended to argue those disputes on the world stage at the WTO in trade agreements. I've always thought just going face up with Europe to address some of these longstanding issues is always better than the status quo there. I think it was encouraging to see the EU and Commissioner Juncker here with the White House sort of laying out those steps forward. I was pleased to see USTR give us the letter of negotiation and lay out the negotiating objectives, all very positive. I think the key here, and I'm looking at this staged approach with a little interest in figuring out exactly what they foresee and how they want to do it. For us, obviously, a comprehensive agreement. At the end of the day, however we get there is the importance. Industrial services.
Do you see a deal that doesn't have ag in it?
From the U.S. standpoint, I don't
the
know how you
standpoint?
make that sale
I don't
at all.
either.
It's just you got to address it's tariffs, it's non-tariff barriers, and again, why do the heavy lifting of work on an agreement and leave unchanged some of the strongest tensions we have?
See a deal without services?
I don't think so. Look, I think the industrial side, moving toward, and I'll give the president credit on this, moving to having zero tariffs, zero subsidies, zero barriers is exactly what we in this room have fought for an awful long time. I think that frankly these days there's no reason developed countries aren't at zero on the industrial side. That's an important step. I think we'll need more than that. And so it's interesting. I was disappointed to see where the EU's, but not surprised by the EU's early discussion without agriculture. And Ms. Maelstrom was in the other day. We had to talk about it as well. But I think that's pretty important. Right. So the staging, I'm interested to see what's in each stage.
Right. No, how you structure a deal like that. But we saw with TTIP, the weakness from my perception was on their side. When we launched into those kind of conversations, it was more stressful on their side.
I do think, again, with Europe, if you believe that fairly traded products, should be excluded from tariffs, I think that the sooner we reach gain progress where those tariffs and retaliatory are removed, I think the better it is for American farmers and businesses and workers, better is for them as well. And so we ought to be open to the types of stage relief from those that could accelerate it. So you don't have to wait years and years. Yeah. I think there's an approach here.
So on the other side of the English Channel.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So talk about that, and then I want to get to, but before we close, I want to get to the WTO.
Okay.
We're being efficient here. Part of that due to the fact that just everything, and it is just remarkable. And no, it is marvelous, and I'm so grateful. And we should also be so grateful, and we should have an entire Congress full of people who know as much as you do about this stuff, so thank you. The UK and what you see happening with Brexit, although it's it sort of changes from day to day, except it doesn't. What do you think?
So what doesn't change is we've got a terrific and important trading relationship with the UK, and we want to make it, not just maintain it, but make it stronger.
Right.
It is really hard as the terms of this divorce go on. We can't flirt too much with the UK, but clearly we want to see the type of agreement on Brexit that allows us to have a full trading relationship, with the UK. I mean, really a full one that isn't constrained by some of the political, barriers that Europe
or a customs union that they're a part of.
Yeah, and they need to be free on the regulatory side. So look, that is a balance. They want to be connected both to the EU and the US. But and I've read so many different interpretations, Ambassador. I should be asking you, the terms of Brexit. How favorable are they to a U.S.-UK comprehensive agreement? Do you have a sense?
Well, my sense is what they're looking at right now would be very hard to negotiate a bilateral deal on the basis of what they're looking at right now. But to the extent that that's characterized as quote temporary, then you start looking at the fact that our current TPA expires July 2021, and temporary takes them into that time frame. So
good point.
It's a bit of a conundrum. I mean, the timeline might, then I'm going to start asking you questions about the future of TPA, which is just too early to. There's too much else going on to have that conversation.
Didn't we just get done?
I know, exactly. But it's not. It is something that I have pointed out to my UK friends, which is there is a groundswell of support, I believe, for a U.S.-UK bilateral.
No doubt.
But that can only happen if the UK can negotiate it, and if the U.S. has TPA. Yeah. I mean, maybe there could be a U.S.-UK bilateral without TPA, but that's kind of, I'm not sure I would be the one, I'm not sure I'd be excited about bringing that up to the Hill and trying to get it through without amendments.
There's so many similarities that maybe that's one that could, but
Think
you're
about
right.
the, think about the amendments. Yeah. Anyway, so U.S. UK. So let's go to the WTO. You know, if you didn't have the WTO, you'd probably have to invent it.
You would. You would.
On the other hand, we've got a couple issues there. What do you think?
I think it's good for the curtain to be pulled back and sort of the frustrations to have gotten more oxygen. Look, a rules-based trading system is crucial. And you're right. If WTO had gone, we would be the first to reinvent something to that. But we have to have an honest discussion about its challenges. And I think, one, the President's right, and the trading in the administration right to raise the issue. Secondly, look, I think it was encouraging for the EU to bring some reforms forward. But for us, you know, there's strong support in Congress for these reforms. Look, we got to address notification reporting. Yeah, you got to address the self-declaration, you know, of developing. And you got to address the appellate body. In the EU reforms, I don't think go far enough. They almost sort of enshrine the current behavior. That's not acceptable. We want really, back in the 90s, you know, how those panels are selected, how they work. We really need to return to where there is, I think, global support for that, because we want that system to work. We want that appellate body, dispute resolution approach. We want that to work, and we need to make reforms to do that. So I think the silver lining out of this, I think people are starting to come to the table on this. And the other silver lining, I was thinking on China, I didn't mention this, but you know, I think the trilateral discussions we're having with the EU and Japan on China are exactly what I'm hopeful. Those are exactly the kind of discussions we have. We ought to be having the same on the WTO reforms as well.
And in terms of some of the fundamental changes, did we get what we paid for?
Yeah.
Questions.
Yeah. And look, we've WTO. I forget the number. I think we've won 17 cases against China. You know, hold them accountable.
My team and I filed a bunch of those.
Did you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so it can be made better, but it's really important that we make that process work. It's a legitimacy issue.
Well, I can
it is
tell.
an undercurrent of trade.
I can tell you, having started out my career during the GATT era, where any member could block any dispute, it was a really frustrating time. I mean, you do want an enforceable agreement. When you win, you want to win, and there are altogether too many. I mean, as it is, the current system takes awfully long time. But then you want an appellate body that's accountable and that's not making it up as they go along.
The first issue I got involved with coming to Congress was GMOs in the European Union.
Yeah, some things never change, do they?
No, I will. My grandchildren will be dealing with GMOs and SBS and the whole thing. So.
Yep.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Congressman, thank you so very much for being here. We really appreciate what you do. It is such an honor to have you at Ways and Means in the Congress as chair, as former chair, and now in your ranking capacity, holding the banner for good trade policy, for sensible trade policy. You're not a knee-jerk anything. You really think it through every time, and you do great things for the United States of America and for your constituencies.
Thanks for your leadership through the years and friendship to me, so crucial. And then for WITA, for those who are here today, at the end of the day, we have never passed a trade agreement or shaped one without the active involvement of nearly everyone in this room. As we begin the work on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, we're going to need you engaged in that in a real way, both on the Republican-Democrat side, on the Senate as well, if we were to carry this across this year. So we're going to be calling on WITA, and the trade advocates in this room to engage in a big way.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much for being here today.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman Brady. Thank you, Ambassador Schwab. Really appreciate it. We're We're moving the schedule up. We're going to be adjusting. We're going to have a little chance for folks to sit down. Special thanks to our honorary conference co-chairs, Ambassador Michael Froman and, of course, Ambassador Susan Schwab. Their early support for this conference helped make it a reality. We're very grateful to both of them. We're grateful especially to Susan for joining us here in person today. Special thanks as well to FedEx and UPS for their leadership of today's event. Their support for the conference will enable both this conference to take place, but also our trade education activities throughout the year, and we're very grateful to both of them for their support. We're also very grateful to our benefactor, as I mentioned before, the Reagan Building and International Trade Center, for their support. And I would like to thank especially as well our event patrons, the American Apparel and Footwear Association, Ernst & Young, Mowry and Grimson, National Retail Federation, Pacific Pension and Investment Institute, Trade Data Monitor, UNO International Trade Strategy, and the U.S. Global Value Chain Coalition. We're very grateful to all of them for their support for the conference, for the vision we had for this first one. We're hoping they'll all come back again next year so we can try to do this again. So we're moving the schedule up a bit. We're going to have a short break here that was not originally planned, but Mr. Brady's schedule was such with the hearing that he had to leave a little sooner. A couple housekeeping items. Our breaks tend to be between 5 and 10 minutes, so they're not long breaks. We're going to have a little bit of a longer one now for you to get a chance to get some coffee and say hello to some friends. The restrooms are to the back and to the right. And after we have about a 10-minute break here, we'll then call up the USMCA panel and get restarted. Thank you.